Hey, what's up, guys? This is Greg Brown from the Foundry, and this is the MODO Mari Games webinar series. It's the first of 7 webinars during December and January to help people get up to speed using MODO quickly. One of the things we hear more than anything else is that people want more training, especially some of the newer users who are coming from other applications, and that's really what this is meant to facilitate. Now, it's also the MODO Mari Games Jam webinar. Last year, I met a person named David Vega, who works or is an organizer for Games Jam events in Florida. He organized one last year, and I'm sure many others aside from that. He currently works for Rockstar, and he's very involved in SIGGRAPH chapters in Florida and in New York. And we started talking. He was saying that he was interested in MODO, and I offered to put on a couple little demos or webinars for them last year. And so what we did was we did like 2 webinars right before the Games Jam, and I flew down for the Games Jam, and the hope was to get people to use it, but 2 webinars isn't quite enough. So this year we're actually expanding it to 7 webinars, starting much earlier, and so hopefully this will allow more people to possibly use MODO for the Games Jam itself. Please go download a trial if you don't already have MODO. Give it a shot, and hopefully these videos or these webinars will help guide you through the process of getting familiar with the new application. Now, the other thing with these webinars, it's not just me. You don't want to listen to me for 7 straight webinars. We actually have guest speakers from the industry as a whole, and the first guest speaker is Tor Frick. And so Tor, we should just eliminate the last name and just go with Tor. He's one of those names that you only have to have a first name only. Tor is an amazing artist. He's incredible, massively talented. He works for Machine Games. If you played Wolfenstein: The Old Blood or The New Order, it's basically like looking at Tor's portfolio or something. I remember when I was playing The Old Blood. Once I was familiar with his work, I'm like, my God, this just looks like his modeling. It's kind of amazing. But Tor has, aside from being massively talented, he also knows MODO extremely well, and he's tailored and customized it for exactly the way he works. And this guy is like whipping out concepts in an hour to 3 hours that are just mind-blowingly awesome. And that's by using MODO's modeling tools, particularly our Boolean tools, which very few people use anymore. And he's brought that back to life because they're freaking awesome the way that he uses them. The rounded edge shader, which is something that wasn't necessarily intended for games. So what it lets you do is it allows you to add a rounded edge to, say, for instance, a hard surface, right, like on this gun right here, which you're going to see me doing this in a later webinar, and bake that down as a normal map. And so you're actually using the real geometry and smoothing that real geometry. And so if I go ahead really quickly and I go ahead and launch my render, let that go ahead and kick into gear, and we zoom in like right here on shotgun shroud. I'm going to click right there. Isn't that cool? Inside the preview render, hit F6 to open up the preview render. You can click just inside the view and it'll automatically select your object and your material for you. Come over to the shader tree. I'm showing you guys too much to begin with, but I've got a material right here at the bottom, rounded edge shader. Let's set that to like 4 millimeters. That is too small because my object, or at least this version of it, is way out of scale. And so 10 millimeters, no. Let's go ahead and raise that on up. Do we have the right one? No, we didn't have the right one. I want that material. My mistake. So it actually grabbed the right one for me now. And we raised that on up to, say, 10 millimeters. And you see, whoa, it went completely crazy. Probably want this to be down around 0.5 millimeters. Okay, so this one is to scale. But what you can do is with the rounded edge shader, you can actually set a rounded edge width. And I'll go ahead and raise up to 1 millimeter. And you can actually make this rounded edge. And that's fully bakeable. And so even, on surfaces like, for instance, this one right on up here. This is the one we selected to begin with. Yeah, and I'll go ahead and throw that on down. You see how bad that is right now. I'll throw that up to 750 UM. And there we go. We got a nice rounded edge on there that we can take off, we can put on, and it'll just bake directly to that surface. And so really makes a big difference as far as how you can tailor and tune low resolution geometry and get really clean normal bakes out of it. around an edge like that, that's one of those situations where if I bake from into an object, I almost always run into too many errors, and this solves that problem. I actually do a bake to and from for my primary surfaces, like the primary planes here, and then I actually do a rounded edge bake, and I combine the two of them together, so I kind of get both best of both worlds. So I've been learning a lot from Tor and his methods as well. All right, so showed you a little bit too much right there. Probably already confused, like, oh my God, you're jumping into things and not explaining stuff. Because you're right, I'm not. And we need to actually go through the basics of how MODO operates, because that's what this webinar is actually all about. Just the basics of how MODO works. Now, if you'll notice, one of the first things I want to point out is the tab layout structure right here along the top. And this is a series of different layouts that you have quick access to for specific tasks at hand. Like if I hop over to the topology layout, you see I have a layout engineered for topology. The viewport is different. We have a special shader for topology mode. UV edit, well, we have very similar layout with our UV window in here, things of that sort. You keep on going through here, painting, sculpting, setup, animate, render, all sorts of specific layouts for the task at hand. Now I'm coming back to the model tab because that's where you're going to be, and I really love the tab layout structure because it actually helps guide you through the process of learning the application, because while each layout is specific to a certain task, you have a certain level of parity between the various layouts. So I suggest that when you learn MODO, even if you're not a modeler, hop into modeling first and start learning our modeling tools, because as you start navigating through these other layouts, you're going to notice a certain level of parity between how the layouts are laid out, and it helps you learn the application just because of the tabbed layout structure. All right, so first off, over here on the left-hand side, well, first off, as far as the interface is concerned, we have our modeling tools menu, and we've got lots and lots and lots of modeling tools. And so you can see I cycle through these really fast because we got lots of them. We could spend like 12 hours learning all these modeling tools. We're not going to go deep into modeling today, but I'm going to show you how to build out your own tool using the tool pipe. And so we'll get into that a little bit deeper. Now, if I select one of my tools, like the cube primitive tool, you'll notice down here we have our tool properties palette. And so any of the tools that I select, you'll have show up in the tool properties palette. You notice how I kind of tried to emphasize tool properties. We want to make sure we emphasize that because this has something to do with item modes versus component modes. We'll get into that in a moment, or a few moments. Along the top, we have the MODO modes toolbar, which contains access to component modes, which component modes are how you access things like vertices, edges, and polygons, and also item modes, which you'll notice that the moment I go into item mode, I have an item selected, because over here in the item list, if I go ahead and expand this, by the way, if I want to not have to like navigate through all these little subfolders I have set up here, just hold down the shift key and click on top of that, and it'll automatically expand all the way to the location of that particular item that you have selected here in the 3D view, which is extremely useful. So I have an item selected because I'm in item mode, and the item list contains items, and items can be an item that contains geometry. This is a mesh item. You can see this by this little blue icon here. And if I go ahead and navigate back up to the top, you can see lights are also an item. Cameras are also items. Texture locators, these are texture locators, are also items. And any of these items that I select will show up down here in the item properties palette down here. And this also has side tabs, much like the modeling toolbar. And you can cycle through here, so an item has access to a lot of different aspects, and they'll show up and they'll change as you switch around. So if I grab this mesh item, we now have the mesh item selected, and I can go down to surface options for subdivision level, things of that sort. And so very important to understand how you interact with the item list. Shader tree, again, this is where all the shading actually happens, and the again part that I was just about to kind of lead into. Everything shows up down here in the item properties palette. So I select an image. Well, there's my options for that image. And I can go ahead and find more components. And you see right here I've got my mesh still selected. So another thing important to clarify, you can have a mesh item selected, you can also have a texture item selected, they'll both be selected. So, you know, you'll end up with lots and lots of stuff here in the side tabs, and you probably just want to keep an eye on that. Let's go ahead and come back over to our item mode itself. Here next to properties is access to channels. So if I select a particular item, you can see the channels associated with that, and lists. Underneath the lists tab, we got lots of stuff. This is all of our vertex maps. This is where we contain UV maps, weight maps for, for weighting, all sorts of different types of weighting. Morph maps, which are kind of like a blend shape, and other maps, which like, UV distortion, vertex normal, stuff like that. We'll be getting into some of those things later. And here's our tool pipe. We'll be talking about that today. And down here, another one I really like to emphasize to people is you take a look through the statistics panel. You have lots of information on your geometry. Like if I want to just go ahead and yank that on up and take a look in here, let's take a look at polygons by vertex. And I only have four-sided polys for the currently selected object, as you can see here. I can press the plus sign and it'll actually select those for me automatically. You can troubleshoot a lot of problems just through this little panel. Like for polys, like sometimes you'll have more than one type of subdivision on, like you'll have MODO's native subds, and then you'll also have the Pixar subds, which are notated by Catmull Clark, and this will let you know if that's actually happening. Co-located polys, there's lots of information in here that you're going to want to make sure you have quick access to. And for undos, if I go ahead and drag up here from the bottom, you see this little command entry window down here. If I pull on up, that's where your command history is located with undos, and if you want to undo something, you can go ahead and actually drag and undo back many levels. And so very, very important thing to know about interacting with the application. Okay, and as far as the UI is concerned, one of the last things we want to talk about is the viewport. And the reason for this is this viewport does the same thing as many other viewports out there. It allows you to move around in 3D space and take a look at your object and, model and select and things of that sort. But it's something, there's something very important to articulate here as far as how you interact with the application. Now you'll notice right here I seem to be like tumbling around relatively smoothly. I can center on my object, so there we go. Now, one of the things that MODO has that you may or may not like is trackball rotation. And you'll notice that as you start navigating around, you can kind of roll and bank at the same exact time, and that's because of trackball rotation. And it depends upon where your mouse is located on the screen as to how it behaves, but it really allows you to whip around fast and get into specific angles for modeling and sculpting and painting. I find it massively useful, and so you can just zip around super, super fast inside the viewport because of trackball rotation. If you're used to another application and you dislike trackball rotation, you can turn it off. All I have to do is click on this little gear icon here, or hit the O key inside the viewport, and then you come up to drawing and control, and if you'll notice we have trackball rotation here, and you can, right now it's at default because it is defaulted to on, and you can turn that off if you wanted to. And so you can see now my axes are locked. If I grab in the corner, it doesn't rotate in the same way. It's still rotating around Y, so it's not constantly shifting it. I suggest you get used to trackball rotation. It's awesome. But one of the great things about MODO, and the reason why I switched in version 101, was because I could do things like turn off the awesome features they added that I am currently unfamiliar with. All right, so navigation style in general. First off, I'm going to show you the MODO style. And then I'm going to show you how to make it something comfortable for you if you don't want to use a new navigation style. I moved over to MODO very early on, partly because of this. I was used to Maya style navigation. MODO let me come over and use a new application, but use that navigation style that I'm familiar with. And that's an extremely important aspect of MODO, and allowing people to switch over to it. You can set your own navigation style. But let's talk about MODO's navigation style first. It is not alt-centric the way that Maya is. It's actually more keyboard centric in that it's Alt will let you rotate, just Alt and left click. Alt plus Control will let you zoom. Alt plus Shift will let you pan. Now there's also other additional features to this. So if I just hold down the Alt key and I decide that, I want to right click and drag and throw. So right click, drag and throw. I can actually spin my model around and it'll just tumble on around. And it's actually a very nice feature. It's something that I've come to use a couple times. A buddy of mine, James Gard, when I was giving a demo, he's like, "Are you seriously using that?" I'm like, "Yes, I love it." He's like, "Yeah, I think you're the only person." I don't think I am. Definitely recommend people give it a try. It takes a day to get used to, and once you do, you'll be that much faster. All right, so Alt plus Control for the zoom option, and if I right click with that, it'll pull out this marquee and allow me to zoom in based on that little box that I draw out in the viewport, which is very useful. And Alt plus Shift, and I can pan. But if I right click instead of left, it will allow me to only go up and down. And if I middle, it will actually kind of dolly in and out, kind of. So important things to know about MODO style navigation. Now on to the ultimate point here. You can set that for yourself. So come up to System and Preferences. come over to remapping. You see my mouse input preset is MODO. You can set that to Maya if you like. Input device, if you're using a tablet, I suggest setting it to tablet. MODO performs a little bit better if you're using a tablet and you set it to tablet mode, or a little bit more predictably. How about that? Let's say. All right, now the last thing I want to show you is having to do with the trackball rotation. Actually, it's not the last thing. There's a few more things, aren't there? There's always a few more things. Is trackball rotation. And if I come up to OpenGL, remember how we turned it off here? Well, that meant we only turned it off in this one viewport only that we're in right now, and all the other layouts it will still be on. And so you can set a global override for that here underneath System Preferences, OpenGL, and you toggle trackball rotation off or on, whether or not you want it, and that will stay persistent throughout the application. So when I come over here now, if I turn that off, trackball rotation of default would be off. Right? All right, there's a lot of options in here. I mean, little things that I think I should point out, like for rendering, if you need to expand your border bake size, that's underneath final rendering. Our baking is done with our renderer, so that's why it's located here. Set to very low value by default. James O'Hare, Farfarer, will tell you to set it at like 32 or 64 or something incredibly high, which why not? Go ahead and do it, because as the borders expand, they won't cross other islands in your UVs. So good idea to have that set really, really high by default, but you need to know where that is. All right, so I kind of skipped over the MODO Modes toolbar, or kind of just alluded to it more or less. The MODO Modes toolbar right here at the top is an extremely important item in MODO, and there are many different types of MODO Modes toolbars depending upon the layout. If I come over to Setup, for instance, the MODO Modes toolbar is different. It's engineered for rigging and setup, stuff like that. And so if I come back over to the modeling layout, let's talk about the MODO Modes toolbar and just take it from the left side over to the right, essentially. Right now, I am in the vertex component mode, but we need to have an item that contains vertices to really edit any vertices. So if I come over to item mode, you can see that I have this one barrel highlighted. And if I hover over any item, it pre-highlights blue inside the scene. And then I left click on it and it becomes yellow, telling me that it is active. If you don't see that, you need to probably have the wireframe on. You can do that just by coming over to hit O. Then we can come down to active meshes and you can set your wireframe settings right here. But if you have a standard keyboard, you're not on a laptop, you can go ahead and just hit the / key. That will turn it off, and Control / will turn it on. That is on the number pad, by the way. I'm sorry, not on the main keyboard area, but on the number pad. And you also need to have number lock on. A lot of stuff is done with the number pad in MODO, which is really cool. Like another great one, the 0 key. I can expand and contract because underneath the model layout right now, if I hit 0, there's your orthographic views. You're probably going to ask, how do I have my orthographic top, front, and right views visible? You can do that just by hitting 0 on the number pad, or also by hitting these diagonal arrows inside of most of the viewports. Since MODO's interface is based on XML, this works in almost any of the different panels here. Essentially, all these are forms, and forms contain different types of components, sometimes buttons, sometimes a viewport. And so even if I hit the 0 key here, I can expand and contract a particular menu. And this is really useful, especially for things like the item list and the shader tree and stuff like that. And so really great way of being able to interact with your application. I had to do a demo of MODO at 640 by 480 that just, we found that out the moment the demo was supposed to start. And the only way I was able to get through a demo like that was because of the ability to expand and contract. All right, so you can go ahead and hold down the Shift key as well to shift select any items, to have multiple items selected, of course. So really great way of being able to interact with a large scene, to be able to select individual items, to be able to operate on that item and that item only. Now, really cool thing, I select this, of course, and it selects my item for me in my item list. So let's come on down to properties. And let's take a look at this really quickly, because I have a mesh item selected, and you'll notice something that right now, if I take a look at the item properties, I have transform options, and those transform options are all at 0 for position, rotation, and scale is 100%. So everything is all default. And inside this item contains a whole bunch of geometry. It contains vertices, edges, and polygons. And I want to be able to go in and start editing. So I selected the item, and then I come over into a polygon component mode. And I can select polys, come over to vertices, and I can select vertices. Right click to be able to lasso select. By the way, if you right click an open space in the viewport really quickly and just let go, you can change your lasso style to rectangle, circle, ellipse, all sorts of good stuff like that. Be able to have quick access to those types of things. And so let's go ahead and select some vertices, and we'll come over to edges and select edges. And these selections are maintained as long as you don't switch your item. And this will allow you to go ahead and do things like, a model, and I'll go ahead and, bevel something out by selecting a poly, Shift B for bevel. You see it automatically selected that here in my viewport for me. And I can modify in the tool properties how far that bevel goes out, things of that sort. And I'll undo that. Now, another thing that happened, I accidentally left background constraints on. So if I want to access my background constraints, this is the type of thing. It's really good to have this open because you know what's going on in your scene. Kind of jumping out of order here, but it gets the point across, right? Snapping is toggled off right now. I could toggle it on. But if I want to access the background constraint options, I can hold down the control key, and I have alternate command structures available to me. So I have my constraint options here. I can open that up, and it's like, you know what? I don't want background constraints on. That's probably going to do some bad things during this demo. So now it's gone. Great. If I want snapping, I can also access my regular snapping tools with the Alt key instead of Control. And there's my snapping tools. We'll go into that a little bit further. But you can see here I've got my various components selected. Very cool. I can model with them. And if I want to switch back to an item mode, I can hold down Shift plus this and then hit the space bar. And that will let me get back to item mode or back into component modes. And one of the things you'll notice is that MODO users, just by hitting the spacebar, can navigate through the component modes and look at their keyboard. So who's been using MODO for a while. The spacebar is probably really, really shiny. That's because they're constantly just tapping away on this, and it's really, really great. If you right-click on these, you can also get access to pivots and centers as well, which those of you coming from Maya, that's going to be very, very important to grasp and understand. All right, so if I come into a component mode, and I deselect that poly I had selected. So when nothing is selected, you can see it tells me right down in the lower right-hand corner, all polys are selected because none are selected. If I hit the W key for the move tool, I get a manipulator sitting right on top of my my object. Now, another thing, I don't like where the work plane is right now, so I'm going to hit the page down key to move it back further in space, so it's really not in my way. But yeah, it's centered on whatever item I have selected at present. And so I'll select this, polygon component mode, W key for the move tool, so it's centered right to the center. Now let's talk about action centers really quickly, because action centers they're useful for a lot of things, but they're probably most broadly used when you're doing component mode modeling operations. So if I click on my action centers right here, what if I decide, you know what, I want my action center to be at the origin? You can see it just moved my center of action back to the origin. I can still move my object around, of course, but from the origin. And I also could, say, for instance, come over here and tell it parent if it has a parent. And there really isn't one in this case. I could go with local, and it will align to the averaged local normals of your selection. All are selected right now. So if I select these polys right here, W key for the move tool, local action center, you see it aligned to the polys right there. And what if I decided something like, hey, you know what, I want it to align to that surface, but I also really, I want to make sure that it rotates where it's almost pointing up and down. The action center itself, you have an action center and you have an action axis. And so if I wanted to, I could actually tell it, you know what, I don't want the action axis to be local as it is right now. You see right now the axis is local as well. And I can go ahead and switch this on over to, you know what, I want this to just be auto. And so now it's right up and down, but it's centered at the center of the relative selection right there. And so action centers are awesome. You can use them in really, really, really cool ways. There are hotkeys for them, and the ones that I use the most, right now I have the W key for the move tool. Alt W will center to action center origin. By the way, down here in the lower left-hand corner, you'll see information about your scene and what's going on and what you're doing. See, my action center is origin, axis is origin, and I'm using the transform tool. So Alt W will set to action center origin. Alt D will set to action center selection, and that's probably one that you're going to be using a lot. Alt plus X is local, and Alt plus A is automatic. One of the ones I like the most is element mode, and check this out. With element mode, if I come over into element and I decide, you know what, I want to perform all my operations from this location in space right here. You see how it's pre-highlighting my various elements for me. And you know, I want to be able to snap. I want to snap to vertices in this case. Or how about let's snap to vertices and edge center. And so I can toggle these on. And I'll just hover over this really quickly. And so you see how vertices and edges edge centers. You see how that center pops up right there, pop up automatically. If I click right on top of it, it will move it to the element that I want it to be oriented towards. Now, this is another one where it's important to understand the difference between centers and axes. And so right now I've got my center for element essentially, but my axis, I want to change that because you can see how it's kind of angled based on the normal of that actual edge right there. And so let's go ahead and change the axis to auto. And now it's actually based on world space. And so I have everything moving from that one point and that one point only. And there we go. And so really, really useful way of being able to interact with lots and lots of objects very quickly and easily. I also highly suggest having fixed snap on in 3D. Now, 2D snap is also extremely useful inside the orthographic views. All right, so kind of showed you action centers and component modes here. Now let's talk about item modes. If you notice, if I come over into a component mode, we're talking about component modes talking about item mode by talking about component modes. That's really confusing, isn't it? All right, but let's go ahead and select that poly, come over to polygon component mode, and we have all these polys selected based on the action center itself. And if I move this object, I see a transform here in the tool properties palette, and so minus 100 millimeters. But you'll notice I don't see it here in the item properties. If I drop that tool, hit W key for the move tool again, this tool properties palette actually resets, and that's because I am moving my polygons with a tool. I'm actually moving it with the transform tool. Now, if I come over to item mode, and I hit the W key, right now that is centered at the origin, and the reason for that is I created a whole bunch of geometry, and I never changed the location of the item's center. So if I come over to polygon component mode, and I drag that on over, and I come over to item mode and hit the W key, you can see its center stays persistent at the origin. And I have no changes to my item transforms, and so I'll undo this. Now if I come over to item mode and I move this, you see I see the movement here while I'm using the tool. This is the tool properties, and so properties of the tool are being displayed, but I also get a record of that transform. And if I wanted to keyframe that, I could actually keyframe it by just toggling it right there to red. And I want to have that just right at gray because I'm not going to use it. I'll undo that. So item modes versus component modes are very important. And this is one of the ways that you'll be able to center your item. Now you can use an action center. Now Alt D and Alt X in the case of this item will both actually perform exactly the same. So action center selection and local all will go to the origin because that's its location. Period. Now, if we wanted to go ahead and make a few changes to this, we could come up to Edit, and we could go Center to Bounding Box. And you know what? I want my location to be from the top. And so just check the bounding box and moved it up to the top. And so you can change where your center axis is actually located very quickly and very easily, and your transforms, of course, update. So that's a really easy way to change your center, essentially. But let's talk a little bit about how do we actually change the center of an object, especially if, what if we want, this vertex to be the center of action, essentially. I really probably shouldn't use that with action because we have action centers, but what if I want that to be the center of my object where I perform all animation from? I'd be rotating around that vertex, stuff like that. It's actually very easy. And so if you right click on top of items, you come down to center mode, and you see we get this little center display instead. I click on that, it becomes orange. And I'm going to change my action center over here to element. I'm going to toggle snapping on just by left clicking on top of it and hold down the Alt key for my options, and I just want to go to vertices. And so now I can actually go ahead and toggle that on over, W key for the move tool because we need to move it, and I got fixed snap on, great. And I can go ahead and just move my center on over. And so actually I'm going to have to maybe not go into that into element mode, because it really isn't an element, it's just the center element. And I can go ahead and move that on over into place. And I want to have my center handle on. That'll make it so I can grab it. For some reason it was off. You see now I can go ahead and snap that center into its proper location, and then I can toggle that. Just click on top of it or off of it to toggle it off, and then press the space bar to drop the tool. So space bar allows you to cycle through component modes and item modes, and it also allows you to drop a tool and kind of reset things. We're going to talk about that a little bit further. But now, if I come back over, I right click on top of here, come back to item mode, W key for the move tool, Alt D, it's just going to be for wherever it is. You can see that actually the transforms have changed, and I have this centered perfectly around that vertex. And so using your snapping tools with centers and also with pivots is extremely useful way of being able to set up how your items are organized. Okay, now for symmetry. And so all I have to do to turn symmetry on is toggle it on. I can also hold down the Alt key to access the options for symmetry to decide which axis I want to have symmetry on. And once I don't want it, I can just toggle it off. We also have cool options like topological symmetry and the ability to symmetrize, stuff like that, all accessible through that quick access palette. Now, fall-offs. Fall-offs are very useful for a lot of things, heavily used in modeling, but like what if I wanted to do something like, hey, let's go ahead and use a noise fall-off. And if I grab the move brush or move tool and I go ahead and pull it on out, probably want snapping off, so I'll toggle that off and pull it on out. You see how that's deforming very awkwardly? That's because of the noise fall off, which is extremely cool. So it's not actually deforming awkwardly, it's just doing things I probably would never want to do to this actual mesh. And I can change that scale interactively and go down there and modify that. And so now it's actually applying a mask over the entire object. I'm altering the scale, and it allows me to deform something really, really quickly and easily. Great for adding like distortion on roofs and stuff like that. Go figure. I have a demo for that. We'll talk about stuff like that a little bit further later as well. And we talked about snapping ever so briefly, where I hold down the Alt key and get to my options. Got lots of snapping options. Snapping is really powerful in MODO, and so like for instance, if I use the rotate tool, hold down the control key and left click and drag, probably want noise off. It actually snaps to preset angles depending upon what I have set here for my snap angle itself. And so really, 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 really useful. We also added select through, which allows you to select through your items, which is very handy, of course, and the work plane. Let's talk about the work plane. Our work plane is visible right now. And let's go ahead and create a new mesh item by hitting N as in Nancy. You can see right here in the item list, I've created a new mesh item. And I'll come over to the cube primitive tool, left click and drag out. It's also a plane primitive tool. If I wanted to make it a cube, I can just grab that handle and left click and drag out, pull it out. But you see that it actually created it aligned to the work plane, right? And what I want to do is I'm going to reset my work plane and make sure that I can actually get it to align the way I want it to. And I'm going to left click and drag out. And you see there we go, and there we go, and there we go, and again, there we go. And if I wanted to actually hit page up or page down, I can change where it's oriented, like push it forward or push it back. So it's a really powerful way of being able to interact with geometry that isn't the center of your actual world itself. And so really great way of being able to lay out geometry all over the place. Now let's take a look at this one right here. I'm going to come to polygon component mode, left click to paint select my object, and I'm going to rotate that. I'm going to hit Alt X so I have a local orientation. And there we go, got an awkward form right here now. So I've selected this one poly right here. I can come to the work plane and align that work plane to the selection. And you can see that it actually aligned to that selection. Now I probably want to actually go ahead and bring that page up and down again because I've got a slight offset on it. But you're able to actually reset the center of action or the center of your scene as a whole by doing this. And even if you wanted to do something like, all right, I'm going to create a new mesh item, or create a new one. I'm going to copy and paste, right? Because you can just Control C, copy, Control V, paste. And I'm going to offset that right here and move that and see how it's nice and aligned. I'm going to go over to polygon and use the thicken tool and pull that on out. And what if I wanted to do something like, you know what, I want to use a radial array. And so I'm going to duplicate this, click on radial array tool. And you know what, I'm also going to right click on it instead, because you see any tool inside of MODO that has this little widget, this little arrow down here in the bottom right hand corner, that tells you that there are more associated tools. And so we can use instancing. So I could do an instance radial array if I wanted to. Probably don't want that to be a count of 24. But now if I click on that, you see what happened? It actually just centered on a radial array around the local action center. I'm going to undo that. Now what if I go ahead and set that on over to origin and click inside the view? And see now it's actually duplicated around the new origin established by the work plane. And since I did that with instances, you see none of these other items are selected. or selectable, and that's because I only operate on this one item and this one item only. And isn't that awesome? You can also grab the sculpt palette, maybe grab something like the move brush, left click and drag out. And your selections are masked, by the way, when you use something like the sculpting tools. You can see right here I'm only grabbing that one poly. If I drop the selection, all are selected and I can grab any of the components I want to. Alright, so let's go ahead and close that on down. I'm going to delete my original item. You see it warns you. It's referenced by other items. Yes to all. Go ahead and get rid of that. And once your work plane to be once you want your work plane to reset the work plane. And by the way, depending upon what your geometry looks like, really has a big effect on how the work plane operates. And so keep that in mind. Like if you have an edge that you want to be able to select and actually get a more precise work plane from that, like select this one edge, work plane, align, work plane to selection. You see we've got a different alignment. So lots of different ways you can do that with the way that selections work. All right, so we got about 10 minutes left for my section here, and so I'm really going to have to zip through. Didn't get through nearly as much as I wanted to, but that's a good thing that we have 7 of these webinars, isn't it? At least I think it's a really good thing. Let's reset our work plane, and let's go ahead and create a new scene with Control N. You can see that creating a new scene. One thing that's really cool in MODO, one of those things that not everybody necessarily knows about, is right here. I can go ahead and have this new scene that I've selected open in my current instance of MODO, and I still have access to my previous scene, which is extremely cool. And so if I come over here and I have this empty scene, I also can toggle on the visibility of my other scene or any other number of other scenes. And so even though I can't do anything in here, I can still work in this scene and view it here in this scene, which I think is extremely cool. All right, so let's go ahead and just create a basic cube. If you want to create a primitive that is already the right size, you can hold down Control or Shift. Control is actually going to go ahead and create a new cube for you in the existing mesh item that you have selected. I'm going to undo that. Now if I hold down Shift, you see you get the plus sign next to it, and it creates a perfect 1 meter cube in its own mesh item. And that goes for the other presets right here. Make sure to play with Control, Shift, and Alt quite a bit, because the alternate command structure lets you do a lot of really cool things. And I'm going to go ahead and pull that on up. So I'm going to select that one poly, left click and drag on up, come over to my edge component mode, and I'm going to slice through here a couple times with loop slice, and so I hit Alt C to access that, by the way. And I need a little bit more geometry, so I'm going to hit Shift plus D as in David. This gives you polygon subdivision options, and so I want a faceted subdivide. All right, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to play around with a tool that I actually use pretty frequently, and that is underneath the form and the flex tool. It's a pretty cool tool. What happens as you use the flex tool is you can actually flex an object. You can change the number of steps for that and modify the various aspects of how this thing operates. And you see you have the multi-manipulator here, which is extremely useful. You access the multi-manipulator instead of just the transform tool. It's a transform tool, but it's all the different types of transform tools by hitting the Y key, by the way, and the flex tool automatically uses that. All right, so we did a quick flex here, but the thing that's really cool is if I come on over here and I take a look at my tool pipe, and by the way, this usually says list, kind of says it after this, but we're getting the form identifier right there. You'll notice that we have our action center selection and our action axis auto already enabled because we were using that at one point. Even if we hit the space bar, nothing disappears. The tool pipe will hold on to different components that you've been using, and you can then reuse them once you grab another tool to use with. If you want to clear it, hit escape. And there we go, the pipeline is actually clear. But if I hit the flex tool, you see we got something totally new. We've got an action center of selection border, action axis of selection, a selection fall off, and a transform with the multi-manipulator. And that's what allows us to make all these modifications. Now, one of the things I think is really cool about this is, this tool was built using the tool pipe, essentially. And if I hit the space bar, you'll notice it'll actually clear everything out for me because I haven't really done much of anything. But usually it'll actually leave behind various components if I actually build it myself. You see, because since it was a tool, clear out the whole pipe. But let's go ahead and build our own flex tool with some of these components that we talked about, or these aspects that we talked about. So the first thing that we're going to want to do, hit the Y key. We've got our multi-manipulator here, or at least what I always end up calling it. And you see it's centered on the selection. Because our action center, it's not set to anything. If I set it to none, it's just going to go ahead and default essentially to automatic or whatever is actually selected. But we want to use selection border because we want to rotate from the border of our selection. And if I hold down the shift plus the up arrow key or the down arrow key, you see I can select all polys surrounding whatever is already selected, and it'll go ahead and follow right along with the selection border. All right, so we've got that in place, right? Now we also can go ahead and come over here to an action axis of selection. All right, that's good because that's what we had by default before anyway. If we rotate this now, you see, however, it moves from the right location, but there's no fall off. It's not bending. So we add a fall off. We add a selection fall off. And a selection fall off has a number of steps. So if I set that down to 1, you can see now it actually it rotates with a very short fall off. And when I increase the number of steps, that in itself increases. And down here you have shape options like ease in and ease out and smooth, different ways to modify how that fall off behaves and how it affects the tool that you're actually basically creating right here. So we have built on our own essentially the same thing as the flex tool using the tool pipe. And unlike the flex tool, which is a standalone tool at this point, if I hit the space bar, you see at least my fall off, my selection, and my selection border behind. I hit the escape key and it clears it all. And so this is something that's very important to understand because you may be interacting with a bunch of tools and you're like, why isn't it behaving the way I want it to? Take a look at your tool pipe. You may have some settings on that you left on from before, kind of like how in the beginning of this video I actually had my background constraints on because of course I was playing around with that before. All right, so this has been a very basic overview of MODO, at least interacting with it. Let's talk a little bit about selections before I totally close down. We got a few minutes left that I can take advantage of. If you select one poly after another, you can hit the L key and you can create select a loop. Any of these, if you want to select a loop, like for edges, if I double click on an edge because it's inherently part of a loop structure, it will select the whole loop for that's connected to that edge. Now, if I come over to polygon component mode and I double click, it will actually select my entire object because it's selecting all connected at that point. And it's the same thing with vertices. Edges is the one that will actually go ahead and select a loop for you. Now, in polygon component mode, if you want to select a loop, you select one after another and hit the L key. That will work for any of the other components as well. So one after another, L key, and you can select that way. Now it's very intelligent too. If I select one, skip another along the same loop, up arrow key will go ahead and select each one following in order because it knows how to behave. If I skip 2, it will skip 2. And so really, really cool stuff. And then once that's in place, I could do something like hit the L key for loop. And because I went along one loop and then I established one after another, I hit the L key, it knows to go ahead and follow the loop structure that is contrasting. And so very, very intelligent in that respect. Another big one as far as selections is really a tool, and it's actually the element move tool. Everybody calls it the tweak tool. You can access it just with the T key or click element move underneath the deform menu. And what's really cool about this is it allows you to pre-highlight any components. It's an element. It almost should be called component move in a way. But we can go ahead and hover over it, and if I want, I can just left click and drag on a vertex and see I'm not even dropping the tool. And I can go ahead and move these objects on around, which is great. Now let's go ahead and deform this ever so slightly, and actually let's go back to my pulse rifle to actually show you this because it's a little bit more fun. And I'll zoom on in here. All right. Now, a couple things. Centering on your scene. This is one that people definitely have trouble with. Hit the A key. It's going to center on your scene, but you notice how it's centered way, 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 way out here. The reason why is because I have lights on my scene and they're visible. It actually centered on all items in the scene, including the lights, because the lights are items. Now, what if I actually have this one item, this body of the gun selected, and I hit A? Same thing happens, doesn't matter. Now, if I hit Shift plus A, it will actually, kind of like zoom in to the item that I have selected and try and center just on that selection. Now, if I have like a couple polys selected like these right here, it's actually going to zoom in on the selection when I hit Shift A. A will still center on everything. Now here's the really cool one. Like we're looking at it here, right? And I hit Shift A, and it just kind of like zooms in to actually fit it in the viewport. Now, what if I hit Control-Shift-A? It'll actually align to the normal of whatever you have selected, or nothing selected, everything is selected. And so being able to zoom in that way is extremely useful. All right, so we didn't get through everything I wanted to today, but we got 6 more to go through, 7 in total. We'll definitely cram in a lot of information. This was very basic, but I think this kind of information is very important. See, MODO is based around an architecture called Nexus, and that's what we developed MODO on. And really, it's what makes MODO special at its very core, because MODO at its core is just a core itself, and modeling is a module. Rendering is a module. All of our various tools, our sculpting tools, are a module. And the reason why we are able to do really interesting things in MODO, things we wouldn't quite expect, like Tor Frick's rounded edge workflow, is just because of the way that these different modules are put together. It improves the development process for the application by having this modular development approach, but it also allows us to put things together in really interesting ways. And a lot of the tools that you see in MODO at this point with version 9 are combinations of all those things that maybe even at first weren't even thought about. But that modular nature allows you to do crazy stuff. And we're going to get into this a lot deeper, but just as an example, like what if I wanted to use a radial fall off here in the UV view? And there you go. I'm using a radial fall off. And that's because we treat the UV view the same way we treat any other view, and because the fall offs and stuff like that are basically a modeling tool, they just happen to work inside the UV viewport. Selections work, like double click, it'll select and automatically select an island. There's so much stuff. We definitely got to go through more of this. So glad there is 6 more. Thanks so much for listening, guys. And again, this is just the practice run through session. Hopefully we don't have to use this. Maybe we will. I definitely want to give you the highest quality possible. But now on to Tor Frick. And let me know what else you want to learn. Have a good day.
All right. Well, thank you so much, guys, for listening to this. I promise they will grow far more interesting and compelling as they go on, at least for my portion. The portions for people like Tor and Barry in 2 days are interesting, period. So, without further ado, let's go ahead and have a little chat with Tor and watch him work, which I can't wait to do. Oh, Irene, you're watching me. Irene's one of the other creative specialists.
People are clapping and saying woohoo.
Okay. Yeah, Tor is here. Tor, they're clapping for you.
Oh.
I think for you too.
No, I think it's all about Tor, because I'm not clapping right now. I'm clapping on the inside for Tor. I don't know how that's possible, but I am. All right. Well, Tor, thanks so much again for doing this webinar series to me. This for all the users, for the Foundry, for myself. This is something that I'm really passionate about, getting these webinars started. Like I promise the technical components of this will continue to improve as it goes on, because we're deciding which services we want to use, which ones work best, things of that sort, and you can help us out with that. So sorry for any sort of problems with the video, and we will be providing higher quality video after the fact.
We actually do have a Twitch stream, but we're still working on getting approval to do that. So
yeah, well, there's a lot of options, and we're looking into them. But again, thank you so much for showing up. Your work is absolutely amazing. We just want to talk to you a little bit about where you came from, how you became a 3D artist, and why you gravitated towards MODO. So Tor, how did you become a games artist? How long ago did you start using 3D?
Around 10 years or so, properly. I did some 3D before that, though, but that was basically in Bryce, so it doesn't really count. So
I hear you on that. I used a program called Milkshape 3D at one point for a little while. Surprising how many people ran across that. How did you? Why did you end up getting involved in games? Was that like a conscious decision, or did you just want to work in 3D in general, or?
No, I always wanted to work with games. I started modding games when I was really young, and modding 2D games on my Mac, and just replacing sprites basically. So the reason why I learned 3D in the first place was to just make prettier spaceship models for my sprites.
Prettier spaceship models for your sprites. What are there any particular games that you modded?
What are they called? Really old games on the Mac, like Escape Velocity, for example. From the 90s or something. I don't even remember.
Man, you got started in that stuff earlier. I saw the moment for me where I was just like, oh my god, I want to do this, was when a buddy of mine brought over the Simpsons mod for Doom, and all of a sudden it was like, you know, every imp was Barney and stuff like that. It was just like, whoa, like, can I do this, please? Like, this is exciting. You know, I can make it my own. So you currently work at Machine Games. Have you worked at any other studios?
I worked at the People Can Fly, previously Epic Poland, and before that I worked at Ubisoft Massive.
Okay, all right, gotcha. Now, I don't know how many people here have played the latest Wolfensteins, which would be Wolfenstein: The Old Blood and Wolfenstein: The New Order. The New Order being the first of them, but I love them. They're great games. They're gorgeous. I love id Tech on top of it all, and you know, walking around in that game, I remember the first one, I was thinking to myself, like, wow, this is a beautiful game. It's a really well-made world, period. Everything looks very tangible. And then I found out by the time the second one came out that you were, you know, the art director on both of those.
Yeah, I co-art directed it together with Axel Torvinius, the other art director. So.
Well, if you guys haven't, anybody out there hasn't seen the game or played it yet, I highly suggest you do, because after you've seen Tor work today, go play that game, and it's like walking through like his portfolio or something. It's like all of a sudden you start seeing it. Even if the art wasn't made necessarily always by you, you could see your influence.
It's a live Twitch stream from Tor, but it's already happened, so it's like kind of weird. You're like, I thought this was supposed to be being built. Also, real quick, some attendees are having a hard time hearing Tor, so.
Right. See if I can fix that.
Just start yelling at us. That's what we clearly want.
Is it better now? I don't know how loud it is.
Yeah, that's good. That's good.
All right, cool. I accidentally turned down the volume, I think.
Okay. Well, awesome. I was hearing you crystal clear, but we want to make sure everybody definitely can. And again, these will be reposted.
I'm just the messenger, so you know.
So, what made you move towards MODO?
I actually I started out using Lightwave, and then around the time MODO 1 was released, I saw some videos on the selection tools, and I gave it a try, and then I was just instantly hooked. I've been trying other 3D programs since, but I didn't like them as much, so I stuck with MODO through the years. So I've been using MODO for like 10 years now, I think.
Well, since it began, huh?
Yeah, pretty much.
Yeah, no, it's the same story here. I came from Lightwave and Maya, then over to MODO, and it was just there was an advertising campaign right when MODO came out. I don't know if you remember it. It said Domo MODO, and the first time I opened up MODO, I actually said Domo MODO. I don't know why I liked that, but it was just one of those things. Like MODO was just this inviting application. Like the moment I opened it up, I felt like it was like, hey, you're here. You've always wanted to use this tool.
That quote was all Emmanuel Martin. It was awesome.
Was it? Oh, that makes sense. Okay, fair enough.
Yeah,
being in Japan and all that.
Little bit of trivia there for you.
Yeah, awesome. All right. Well, I'm sure everybody's really eager to see you work. I certainly am. And again, thank you for joining us on this. And you have any guidance on what you're going to make for us today?
I'm going to be doodling on some kind of spaceship, some space gunship thing.
Yeah. Okay. That's one. I did forget one thing to ask you. Do you have an engineering background?
No, nothing at all.
Okay. All right. Well, those of you who haven't seen Tor, that question is gonna pop up in your head like this guy must be an engineer. Those who have seen Tor, can you believe that? I mean, so how you seem to have like an understanding of machinery. It's pretty obvious from the way you work.
I wouldn't say I have an understanding. I'm just, very good at making stuff up, maybe then.
Okay. Well, everything looks very tangible. That's the thing. It's like every time you look at it, it's like I would not have thought to make that object that way. It looks like something that I would find in a factory.
I think that if someone that actually knows mechanics look at it and they would just go like, why are these pieces here? That makes absolutely no sense.
Not really. I actually did some industrial design, and when I watch your videos, a lot of things do make sense. So I definitely can back you up there. So yeah, a lot of things. Happy accidents are good things, just like happy trees.
There you go. Well, regardless, whatever you've done to develop this I don't know, way ability to interpret mechanical objects into these concepts. It's absolutely stunning. All right, so I'm not going to take up any more time. I'm sure people are like, come on, let's see it. So let's go ahead and pass the baton over to Tor. And Tor, again, thank you so much. Take as long as you want. We'll just be around here. I'm going to go grab a cup of coffee right now. Guys, ask questions. Brandon and I will be fielding those questions, and we just want to let Tor work so you guys can see a master at work.
Yes, thank you, Tor, and it's time to enter the Tor Fricks. Like the Matrix. I'll stop now.
Okay, has Tor been passed the baton, Brandon?
The thing.
That should be clicked. Hang on, let me click him real quick. All right. You are now the presenter, Tor.
All right. Okay. Does that work?
Yep, I see your screen.
Yep, the video should be popping up again. And again, if you're having any issues with video or audio simultaneously, just reconnect real quick. That should fix your issue. If not, if you're having issues with audio, there should be a button up there for voice or call in using computer, and you guys should be all set.
It's glasses. He's making glasses. What do you think, Brandon?
I think those are actually, what are those things called?
For uneven glasses.
No, I can't even think right now. It's strange. It's the coffee table, the sliders that you put glasses on.
Coasters?
Yeah, those things. Coasters. They look like coasters to me. Like really.
Well, they could be. Yeah, they are. They are a coaster.
Yeah. You need some big glasses.
Coastery. This could be fun. Just kind of predict what is. No, you're not supposed to hear Tor. See, that's one of the things. Sorry about that. We talked about this yesterday. Tor for most of the streams usually just works so that he can focus on working. And Brandon and I are going to be here to field questions. So if you guys have any questions, chime in. Brandon and I will be here to catch those, and we'll ask Tor. But we want to show you the way he works, and that usually is, at least for his case, quiet and working.
Yeah, I normally work with tea and music in the background, but that's just me.
Nicholas, hey, what's up, dude? Nicholas will be on one of our future ones. Artist at Raven is going to help us with scripting in MODO.
Awesome, can't wait. And Tor, you normally have some pretty cool jams that you play in the background of your Twitch streams, which I like your music. Your musical tastes are good.
Loud music.
Yes, he is using the standard Boolean features, but he has them macroed to the teeth. That's what's crazy. There also are some scripts on our share site. Another person made for the actual for scripts that do Booleans in a similar way. They're much more streamlined. Now, that's one of the things to remember here. Now, this is one of those situations where a lot of times you're not going to know what's going on. A lot of the times I don't know what's going on, and that's because Tor just has MODO customized to his liking. He has other streams, and he also has tutorials on Gumroad. And so in the thread after the fact, we'll go ahead and post a link for you guys to those tutorials. So instead of just watching an artist's work, you can also understand exactly how. But I don't know. For me, I like watching an artist just operate.
Well, I'm definitely seeing a starship here.
I'm seeing a starship too. I think that's pretty transparent and obvious.
Yeah.
Okay, now one thing that's interesting to point out here, Tor, if you don't mind if I just ask sort of a question. You have a lot of preset items.
You mean my kit bash stuff thingies?
Yes.
Or yeah, a few. It depends on what I'm doing, but since I tend to reuse a lot of basic detailing in shapes, I always try to bring in some kit
That's
bash
usually
stuff.
for the detailing phase.
Yeah, sometimes before that as well, I will be using them a bit today as well because sometimes you are constructing machinery and you already know which components you're going to use. So I just bring those in from the start because I know that instead of just blocking them in, I just do them detailed from the start since I know what it's going to end up like. So.
Got some other questions on the side here. Any new tutorials for Gumroad, Tor? Possibly with procedural materials at all?
Say that again.
Someone's asking here if you have any more, any new tutorials coming to Gumroad, possibly with procedural materials.
I have some new tutorials coming relatively soonish, but nothing, really deep on the procedural materials. The stuff that I normally do is very, very basic, so I wouldn't say that there's enough information there to justify an entire tutorial, I think. It's pretty basic stuff, actually.
Gotcha.
I know what you mean, but at the same time, it's like your materials look great. That's the thing, it's really good use of procedurals and also good use of tiling and combination. Seems like you get away with quite a bit.
It's mostly cheating.
Yeah. Yeah, but isn't that our job? I mean, because I used to say exactly the same thing, and it was clarified to me. It's like, well, good, you're doing your job if you're cheating.
Yeah, smoke and mirrors, smoke and mirrors.
Okay, Stan and also Leonard. Scripting on MODO. You do not have scripting. You do have macros. And you can emulate quite a lot of this workflow using macros. In fact, there's a posting on the Steam forums by Gamby who tried to offer up some macros that helped out with this Boolean workflow.
I never, make any scripts of my own. I only use other people's scripts, and then I move.
Okay. There we go.
Combine other people's scripts into macros, so I just combine stuff instead.
There we go.
Script bashing is definitely a good term.
Script bashing?
So when you're creating these things, do you ever get into any sort of storylines that comes into it, or do you just create?
I normally just create, because most of the time I don't know what I'm going to create before I start. So, and then sometimes it ends up not looking very good. And then you just have to improvise instead. Try to save it.
Gotcha. So, there's a little bit of lag on your end. I think it's just because you're doing so much. You're doing so much. Got some questions on the side here. Okay. Do you ever get mesh issues with your booleans from time to time, Tor?
Well, some mesh issues. The main issues I get that I find annoying are, just smoothing problems. Occasionally, I get. I don't really get that much problems with the geo. I mean, of course, you can't convert it to sub-Ds or anything because it's going to be very, very messy.
Right.
But in general, it's pretty fine. It's just when I want to have like relatively correct smoothing, and sometimes when I do really complex booleans, the triangulation mess up a bit, just mess up the smoothie. But other than that, I don't really have much problems with it.
Gotcha. And Tor's Twitch channel, what is the name of your Twitch channel? I thought it was just Sniffer, is that right?
That's a good question. Maybe it's Tor Frick. I don't remember now.
Just go to Twitch and either search Sneffer, SNEFER, or Tor Frick, and you should be able to find him. Sorry, since I'm leading this WebEx from my machine, I just don't want to go to any other web browser right now and slow things down. So that's why I'm not going to do it right now. But I can definitely post that later for you guys. Oh, this is looking sweet.
Yes, it is. Okay, Tor, you did have a question. Did you acknowledge the mesh fusion?
Thank you, Magnus. Yeah, we took care of some of that stuff.
One of the things I'm going to be showing you guys in the later webinars, 2 days where we are showing mesh fusion. And it's actually interesting. Unfortunately, not all of it's going to be shown. Some of it will be shown in January. And the reason why is because you can actually bake with a live mesh fusion object. You can have your low poly object on one layer, and then your live mesh fusion object has multiple other layers. And you can bake down from the live mesh fusion object without freezing it, which is extremely cool. And so that pulse rifle is actually a combination of mesh fusion, of some of what I interpreted as Tor's techniques with rounded edge and booleans, and also just standard modeling techniques. And we will be providing that asset to you probably by next week. You guys are going to get a lot of stuff during these webinars if you show up. I'll be providing that weapon. I'll also be providing a fully articulated human skeleton, and we'll also be providing a few macros here and there. Got some nice UV macros. Can't wait to show you guys some macro tools. The UV tools.
I love that the style of this looks like just a science fiction starship hot rod. It looks really cool.
Oh, thank you for coming, Rob. Much appreciated, and please come to the future ones.
Also, as far as mesh fusion goes and Tor's use of it, Tor,
Yes.
You're not using mesh fusion in this construct right now, are you? But do you ever use mesh fusion in your workflow?
I don't use it that much actually.
Okay.
Mainly because there's just a few instances where I feel like I need it. I think it's better used in other fields than
Gotcha.
what I'm necessarily doing.
Yeah, there's actually an interesting thing. I was on that pulse rifle I was working on. I was having to put these like cuts in the sides of the handle and on the sides of the pump for the shotgun itself. And one thing I noticed is we're going to talk about this with mesh fusion, is how you can source components of geometry from the fusion mesh. And depending upon whether or not you use airtight draft mode or not, it behaves differently. And so for the cuts, I was actually able to grab the geometry from the mesh fusion item and then build off of that to have a low poly quad mesh that looked really, really, really clean. So we'll be talking about things like that. Yes, we will be talking about retopology. I believe we are talking about retopology while I start looking for this. We should be talking about it either Thursday or the week following. Let me just make sure. Yeah, we are talking about it on Thursday, topology. Unfortunately, it's going to be topology and other modeling tools and all that, but I think I can communicate the important aspects of topology to you guys.
Hey, also, guys, when you're posting your questions, instead of doing it privately, try to do it to all panelists, so that way Greg and I can both see it, and we can actually answer your questions faster.
I keep on seeing you answering a question. I'm like, where did that go?
That's all good. So let's see here. So we have some other private ones that I think Greg, might be a little bit easier for you to answer because you are more skilled than I am in this. So let me, I'll just text it to you. How about that instead of reading it?
Perfect.
That sounds groovy.
So, Tor, we have a question from Sharu, so I hope I'm saying your name correctly. If I'm not, correct me phonetically. When modeling vehicles or fictional stuff, are you using references or do you have a vision?
I don't use references in general. I always have. I've looked at enough references to have them in my head. So I normally just have an idea of what I want to do, or if sometimes when I, for example, live stream and stuff like that, I just do whatever I feel like, basically. So
Okay.
So I wouldn't say that I have references, like available in front of me, but I have looked at enough references to have them.
Thanks for making this even more intimidating, Tor.
References is in his mind.
Yeah, references, my mind.
He is the reference. That's what it is.
I hope not. Otherwise, he kind of looks like an aquatic animal. Kind of looks like a stingray to me, or something like it.
I love the grills in the bottom. That's
There's
awesome.
something about that. The moment you see that, it's like, huh, yeah, it kind of looks like a heat shield. All
Yeah.
right, All right. Well, so the question that you sent to me via text, Brandon. The question is, I had an issue with normal baking Mirageo and MODO. The normal map looks great in MODO, but in other applications, the seam is visible in other applications, like Substance Painter. And secondly, I was unclear why you split your geometry on its UV seams as well as hardening your edges. Okay, that is actually a really big question that we are going to be tackling, especially like that pulse rifle, for example, is going to be what's going to be used on my portion of it. And then Farfair, who created the Vertex Normal Toolkit, James O'Hare, he's going to be talking about in-depth, specifically why you split your UV seams and stuff. It's a very wordy, kind of longish topic. We will be going there in early January.
Nice. Also, from Dominic here, he's asking, did he come from Max or Maya before that, or what are the biggest points for him about MODO?
For me?
Yes.
Yeah. For me, the biggest points are how easy it is to customize. And you just, I don't know, it's very fluid for me. I don't mind that it's, destructive modeling. So I've never been bothered by that. I know some people are intimidated by that. For me, it's just, I don't know, it's very fluid, and I keep finding new things to add to my workflow.
An interesting thing, too, is that with 901, one of the things I found was in the past, I just have a habit of making scenes with lots and lots of stuff because I reuse things over and over again. But I was finding that scenes would slow down and I would create a new scene in older versions. And I find I'm doing less of that in 901. I had like 800 layers in this one scene and I didn't even realize it, because I'd just been working on it for a week. And, some significant improvements in handling in that respect in 901.
So here we go. This is going to be an awesome question. I'm also curious. This is a private question too. So Magnus wants to know if you're using a special mouse. I love special mice, so I'd love to know that too.
Oh no, you're totally using an MMO mouse, aren't you?
I am.
You are?
Okay.
I knew it. Yeah, I use mouse with many different buttons for macros.
Wow, man, we should totally just assign sounds to your different buttons and just call it Tor music. No, not cats.
Yeah, I have a 20-button mouse.
20.
Yeah.
Ooh, is it white? I think I know the one you're talking. What brand is it?
It's a Logitech G600, but it's not the
okay.
best one.
Yeah, I figured. All right, cool. That's awesome.
All right. Wow.
Well, Greg got me into the I forgot what one that's called.
Mouse with a keyboard on it.
The Predator. I forgot what it's called.
Oh no, that's the G502, the Proteus.
Yeah, the Proteus Maximus.
It's a great gaming mouse.
Super awesome, especially with those weights. I like the weights actually for modeling. Weighs me down a little bit.
Yeah, Leonard, it's worth a good mouse. And that's one of the things I always skimped on. Okay, pretty off topic. I wouldn't say it's all that off topic, Shrews. You know, there's a lot of reasons. Most of those reasons are opinion, and I think Tor kind of answered that a little bit as far as the customizability aspect. A lot of people who come from applications like Lightwave ended up gravitating towards MODO because it's a different philosophy behind how you handle geometry and polygons, and you have almost like much easier access to that and the components behind it. And so I find that the strength is the user interface, the comfort of being able to interact with it, the customizability, and then also just how geometry is handled. It just seems more intuitive to me. How about yourself, Tor? Anything else aside from the customizability?
Well, I do like the modeling tools. They are very quick, just out of the box. So I just don't feel like I have many tools that I miss that I would like to have, which is one of the big things for me.
Also, keep in mind here, I think when I started actually Luxology in 2011, one of the biggest things that was shown to me by Andy Brown, was just basically being able to create tools from existing tool set. So you'd just be able to combine like as many tools as you want to, and just in a string, and it makes such. It's almost like crafting in Fallout 4, a little bit. I don't know, Greg. You have more experience crafting weapons in Fallout 4 than I do.
Well, you pretty much did nail it as far as the customization thing is concerned, as far as building your own tools. We're going to be talking about that, and that's really the macro system more than anything else, and it's also the tool pipe, like we kind of showed here briefly. Yeah, it's like one of the tools I'm going to give everybody. It's actually already on the forums. Not sure where I could grab you guys a link, but I'm going to give it to you anyway on one of the later webinars. Is a pelting tool for UVs. It's a one-click pelting tool. I noticed that really our UV tool set's really freaking broad. There's lots of tools, and then people think the unwrap tool is a pelting tool, and it's not. It's actually a combination of multiple tools, and I string that together into a macro, turn that into a button, and I've got a one-click pelting tool. So I'll give that to you guys. You'll have full access to it. Sam, my understanding is no. We will ask him, but see, one of the strengths of this, yeah, it doesn't create clean topology, but it doesn't matter because of the rounded edge shader. And I've been trying to repurpose this workflow a little bit for game models like that pulse rifle, which, man, when it's actually all the normals are on it and everything, it looks like a sub-D model, but it's 35,000 polys. And the rounded edge shader is where the secret comes in. Can you speak to that, Tor?
Yeah, so I don't really care about my topology at all because I do end up with using the rounded shader. Let's see if I can just. I don't have adjusted the values, so I don't know if it shows up very well.
Yeah, you got to play around with it. I tried showing it very briefly, but it's one of these things. I mentioned in my little section, I combine, object-to-object baking and also the rounded edge shader, and then paint out between them or layer them on top of each other. And Mari will be touching on those topics. But yeah, the rounded edge shader, that's really, the trick. And if you use Farfare's Vertex Normal Toolkit, many of the issues you run into with bad topology, with smoothing and low resolution meshes, can be taken care of using Farfare's Vertex Normal Toolkit. Okay, so we have another question, definitely for you, Tor. As someone who still goes to school, 17 years old, would you recommend switching to MODO now? I am fluent in Max, but I am planning on switching to MODO. To sum it up, people tell me on forums that MODO is the future. Would you support that statement? I would love to answer that question, but I think my answer is meaningless.
Yeah, we're clearly biased.
I'm pretty biased as well. I would say yes. So.
Well, you're not you're not an employee, fortunately, or unfortunately, I don't know which. But
so your opinion holds way more weight.
Yeah. No, it is not. However, we are working on that. Okay, I think we can say that, right, Brandon? He was asking if the Vertex Normal Toolkit is friendly.
Ooh, well, that's a good question. That's a very good question. Yeah, we're working in the background. I know that I've been telling you guys that for a while. I always try to be as transparent as possible. with as much information as I can give you guys. We are currently in testing. I can say that because that's what we're currently doing. So fingers crossed, and doing our best to get everything out to you guys. All right.
San, yeah, you're pretty much right there. This is really a hard surface workflow more than anything else. It probably typically would not be used for animated bending models and stuff like that, deforming models. However, that's not necessarily always the case, I would say. I could see how stuff like this could be used on semi-organic, deforming stuff, in the sense that, like for instance, a good example would be, oh man, why am I blanking on it? Star, what's the game Star? Brandon, help me.
Come again, what?
New game Star.
Star Citizen?
Star Citizen, yes. Their workflows are really interesting as far as how they model. And I keep on wanting to demo to the guys who work on that game, because I think they would love seeing the way that Tor works, because they have really high resolution geometry that deals with a lot of vertex normals, and actually those would end up even being deforming models even for their characters and stuff like that. And so if you wanted to, like say you had a kind of a character with like a mechanical suit on them or something like that, and that needed to deform, you would just go ahead and cut the lines of like resolution that you needed, the actual topology on top of that into it. And in fact, I know some other studios who do stuff like that with Decimation Master and stuff like that. Horrible topology. They cut their own edges in for deformation.
So, hey, real quick before we get to those other questions up in the chat, still learning this WebEx system here. Seems that we actually have a Q&A section all the way at the bottom here that was kind of hidden from view for a while. So just to get to some of those real quick, if that's cool with you, Greg.
Oh, geez, that's what I was covering. I wasn't in chat.
So you were in Q&A and I was in chat.
QA, you were in chat. Yeah, we were covering the bases.
Nice.
That's right. How about let's do that? You cover chat and I'll cover QA.
Teamwork.
I know. Brandon sings the things he does a lot.
I sing a lot. I'm not a Glee guy though. Let's just put that to rest right now.
Hey Brandon, do you want to build a snowman?
I'm not going to start singing that.
Come on.
I sang it enough in London. I don't want to.
You rapped at a trade show. Come on.
It's not my fault. It's not my fault. If you guys want to see something, I can post you my. It's a Game of Thrones parody that I sang. And it's so funny because when I posted that to the internet, there were people who hadn't seen that episode yet, so they were like, "Spoilers, Brandon! Spoilers!"
Oh, you're one of those guys.
I'm not one of those guys.
You were that day.
Was not. So real quick, this starship, I would not want to duel with this at all, because I want to be in the ship, not flying against it, because this thing looks deadly as hell.
Are those actually guns there in the front, or is that like some kind of like ramjet or something like that? Or
yeah,
I'm not an engineer. I don't know.
Okay, well let's look at that.
Those are engines. Those are engines.
Those are engines.
Okay, we'll call it a ramjet. How about that? Sounds really cool.
Yeah, because if it's sucking in stardust to promote energy consumption, then this is a lot of things that I'm thinking about for our game, because we're trying to like put engineering into our ships. But when you try to put engineering into the ships as well as design and art, you run into some problems. So let's get back to some questions real quick.
I have a QA question here that
you
says,
go for it.
As long as you're working it out. James Morgan asked, I would second that question by a previous user about Tor's procedural material workflow. It would be awesome to hear more about it. Also, will MODO use a metal rough workflow in its PBR shader? Have I missed it? Okay, first off, we are going to be talking about shading during this series, and procedural shading very, very heavily. Tor, if you want to go into some shading, you're more than welcome to. We will be handling that at a later point. I don't want to use too much of your time. And as far as MODO using a metal roughness workflow, you can. MODO's PBR shader is actually slightly more complex as far as the different channels that are available to you, and you can actually recreate a metal roughness workflow with the spec gloss workflow that we have present.
That's so metal. Really quick, as far as people still having issues with sound, there's a button up at the top for voice. If you don't use that, there's a call in using computer button. I know I've been repeating myself there, but there's new people who are joining who cannot hear. Another question. This is from another Brandon Stricker. Awesome. How do you boolean and keep the geo from cutting away, or actually keep the geometry you're cutting away? Tor's done it several times.
Simple, actually. It's just a macro that.
Can you speak up a little bit? It's a little bit hard to hear.
Sorry.
Yeah, now you're farther away.
Right. Now?
He's in the ship.
Does it work now?
No, not really. It's a little bit better.
How about now?
Nope.
Nope. Just start yelling.
Oh, you're gonna do the trade show, my trade show method.
Oh, don't do trade. Wow. When Greg does a demo on a trade show floor.
Let's get back to Tor. But yeah, it's loud. But anyway,
So basically, what I do is that before I keep the geo because I just run a macro that actually copy pastes the geo before I run the boolean. So it's very simple. It's just have a macro first and then it just keeps the geo.
okay, there we go.
Nothing fancy.
So basically, there are a lot of different ways to keep the geo that was just created instead of having it disappear, and you can definitely macro that a variety of different ways.
Yeah, definitely. I have a bunch of macros for booleans.
There we go. Okay. Okay, so we have a question here. My question to Tor. I've seen your videos on YouTube and watched your streams. So my question is, what is your view on traditional sub-D? Are support loops obsolete? Are things like quad chamfer, smooth edge shader, or custom normals the new way to go?
It depends on what you're modeling for, I think. There's still some issues and limitations with this workflow. So there are some cases where you can't use it, but there's also, a lot of the time people put more detail into the sub-D models than they really need, which is, just a waste of time, I think.
Mm-hmm.
So I definitely think that this kind of workflow can, it can at least like 90% of the modeling I do like this because you can't tell any difference. And then of course you can abuse it different amounts, but yeah, I definitely think that sub-D modeling is definitely not as important now as it was years ago.
Yeah, especially in regards to hard edge.
Yeah, and especially now that even if you're doing normal sub-D modeling, you still have stuff like edge weighting. Also, removes a lot of the support loops.
Yeah, one of the things that which my modeling completely changed because of edge weighting. But yeah, no, it's interesting too that you model so fast that you can't help but look at something like this. It's like, okay, it's fast enough to be a concept, and since it's a concept, it's like if you really desperately wanted to model in sub-Ds, then you have good geometry in place that you could use to build a sub-D model off of. And with snapping tools and topology tools, if you really wanted to model in sub-Ds or needed to for some reason, you have a true reference to just copy as sub-Ds.
Yeah, I tend to almost always start with a mesh like this, and if there's something I need to backtrack to and actually consider sub-Ds, I already have,
Got some other questions here up in the chat. Oh, sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off.
I'm sorry, go ahead.
Hard to hear. So got some people who were interested in the retopology and the baking process within MODO. Found it incredibly difficult in comparison to other applications such as Maya, and seeing as MODO is such a good rounded edge shader, seems like a waste not to learn. Definitely agree with that. Greg,
I will be helping out with that, no problem. We will be addressing those situations, and more importantly than even myself showing you how to solve some of these problems, Farfarer James O'Hare will be in on one of the webinars. He now works for us as a developer, and his understanding of baking in normals, I thought I knew what I was talking about until I spoke to him. I mean, like, it's just like, oh my God, this is such a tremendously more complex topic than I thought it was. So we will get there during the series of 7 webinars.
We look forward to getting schooled by Farfarer.
Yeah, Farfarer did school me. Like, it was one of those moments where I chimed in, I'm like, yeah, it works like this, and he was in the chat, and he's like, yeah, not really.
I've had many experiences with you on that. I'm like, this is
yeah, but still, I mean, anyway, I was like, what do you mean not really? And then he starts explaining himself, and it was just like, oh my God, this guy knows his stuff.
Nice. You know, and also, just keep in mind, there was a question a little bit further back. Do you have to sign up for all of these webinars individually? Yes, you do. So if you haven't yet signed up for the next 2 webinars we have for this week and then the next week on the 16th, please go ahead and do so. Just make sure you're all signed up and ready to go. We'll send out reminder invites and all that good stuff. And then have some more questions down here. Let's see here. Watching Tor work. Does Tor always use procedural texturing and UVing? Or sorry, procedural texturing and not UVing.
For my high poly models, yes. I can't be bothered with unwrap them. It takes forever. So I do procedural textures mostly for presentation purposes of high poly models because I don't want to do it, the real way. Pretty much why.
And I got a few questions down here as well. Let's see. Javier, congratulations with the webinar. I'm really enjoying it. Will you guys bring Seneca Barnard to one of these? I bet he has many interesting things to show. I bet you're right. No, Seneca is not involved in these 7. Definitely somebody worth approaching after these to see about future webinars. Essentially the success of these webinars will help more webinars happen for next year and make things like that more popular. Obviously, I can't commit to Seneca's schedule, but he's definitely one of those people we'd love to have on a webinar.
Definitely. The more the more you guys come out to these things and we promote these things, the better turnout we'll have, the better way we'll have to justify them to senior management. So.
And I have a few questions for Tor from Camille. Okay, so 1, how do you solve problems with seams? And 2, did you know a solution to make overlapping UV islands for better texture density? Tor?
Yeah.
How do you solve problems with seams, first off?
Well, depends on what kind of seams.
Yeah.
I'm assuming you mean texture seams. Well, if you mean texture seams, then we really have any especially fancy way of doing that. One upside of using procedural textures is that they are in world space, so they don't care about your UVs. Mm-hmm. So then you actually, you don't get any seams in the UVs space procedurals.
Have you taken a look at any of the triplanar stuff for the node for node-based shading that some people have done?
Yeah, minus triplanar stuff. It's nice.
Gotcha. Yeah, no, exactly. It's a big help for the procedural stuff. And from these questions, I think a lot of us are all on the same page with the importance of procedural texturing and how far it can get you, especially these days, considering we have all these wonderful geometry-based shaders that we can leverage. You can't hear Tor's. Paul Brown said he can't hear Tor's answers.
Yeah, I'm getting a lot of feedback here that I can't hear Tor either. It might be good to turn back to feedback on his mic, possibly through WebEx.
Okay, so the answer to the last question, Tor basically said what kind of seams, and he said if you're talking about texture seams, the way he solves that is largely through heavy usage of procedurals. And the second question he had for you, Tor, is did you know solution to make overlapping UV island, and in brackets it's for better texture density?
I'm not quite sure how to answer that because I'm not quite sure I understand the question.
Oh yeah, I hear you on that actually. If you can elaborate on that, Camille, that would be very useful. Do you mean like actually having two sides, like symmetrical sides of a mesh overlapping on top of each other, so that you're almost baking the two sides at once in a way, or are you actually, saying basically tiling textures over like on overlapping bits of geometry in a UV layout? And Connor McCampbell says there is a Match UV Island script out there that does exactly what he's asking about. Well, Tor, it looks like you and I both have something to take a look at.
Yes, the webinar is being recorded and will be available later. We're working on also repeating Tor's answers for you guys. Greg can actually hear him a little bit better than I can, so I think he'll be repeating them.
Because your headset blew up yesterday.
Well, yeah, I have a new one right now, so I have no idea how it works. It's like listening.
Yeah, let's see. We have. I've seen that Tor did a Quixel tutorial. Tor, will you be using Quixel in the next Gumroad, or was that just a test?
I'm not sure yet.
Tor is not sure yet.
Yep, sorry about that, Gakame. I missed that question before. Sorry I didn't get back to it. Also, Camille, hi, how you doing? It's good to see you. I see you on the indie forums a lot, so good to see some indie users here. Also, there was a question before on certain features within indie, but not in full 901. That should not be the case. Anything that is within indie is in full 901. You were talking about the baking tools and seeing those baking tools in action. I wonder, when you say the Steam version, if you actually mean the original Steam edition of
MODO SE.
Yeah, because if you're talking about the baking tools, and there specifically, Greg, you worked on a lot of those.
Yeah,
videos.
it wasn't the baking tools. It was just it was automated export to Dota. It was really the only difference. There wasn't any difference in the actual baking tools. But we did add an automatic export of assets, to Dota too, which, it's a useful feature, but then at the same time, it's not a whole lot of stuff to upload for Dota either. And you are definitely going to need to correct me on this name, sir. Ruin Lauder. Rod, I would like to get your name correct. I'm probably butchering it brutally, but more of a sales question. Any plans to release a commercial version of MODO, like non-com version of Nuke? Really can't comment on any future products. Sorry, guys.
Hey, Tor, I know you're really busy doing a lot of your 3D assets lately, but would you ever be down with having a game session with Greg and I and several indie users?
A what session?
A gaming session, like we could play maybe the new Unreal Tournament that's in alpha right now. Just an idea for fun later down the road.
Maybe I can let go of modeling for long enough.
No, I never asked you to. No, that's totally understandable. But we got a maybe, so that's good. And yes, Steve, Greg will be covering baking and possibly normals in the future. We've got some other webinars coming up. But as far as Tor, as far as you're concerned, do you bake any of your you bake the rounded edges down?
Yeah, I do. So I always use that as a base for my normals.
Gotcha. And are you going to possibly do that in this session here, or?
No, not in this session.
Gotcha. But I've seen you do that on a couple different Twitch streams in the past, so.
Yeah, I've done that a few times.
Has Tor Frick ever used the smooth edge shader on Wolfenstein?
Yes, I did. Not so much on the. I don't remember if I used it on the New Order, but I used it a lot on Old Blood. I don't think it was. I don't think it was out New Order, thankfully. But I used it a lot on Old Blood.
Awesome. So is everyone liking the stream so far? And what they're seeing from Tor? Good to know. Greg stepped out for a second. He'll be right back. It's gorgeous. Good to know. So those parts that are off in the distance from your kit bash, are those parts and assets that you've made in the past that you just sort of keep around?
Yeah, I made them recently. Because I used the kit bash a lot. Then I took a break from kit bashing. Basically just as a learning exercise.
Gotcha.
But now that I have switched to a workflow that is, involving around the edge shader more, I need to make some new presets that work better with that.
Awesome. If you guys are still having an issue hearing Tor, I just turned my volume up really loud. That might be a problem when it comes to Greg and I talking, but I will try to talk softer so we can all hear each other. So, oh, his volume is maxed out. Okay, that's good to know.
Why?
Sorry, guys, for the trouble with this, but we'll do our best just to repeat Tor's answers for now.
Yeah.
Okay, so we do have a few questions here. And there we go. Where was that? All right, the UV tools are awesome, but is there an option to pack some selected UVs to an empty area of a UDIM? Yes. You need to have them on the same layer, and then you select the UVs that you want to pack to a particular UDIM that maybe has some open space, and then you basically tell it to do it to that UDIM. We will be talking about UVs quite a bit. It's like one of my favorite parts of MODO, so I'll be showing you guys some of my tricks and secrets there. Okay, Chikama asked again. Please, guys, I would almost feel better if you corrected me when I said your name and I say it wrong. Oh, very cool. Love that you did the explode real quick.
Yeah, just yell at Greg if he names you wrong.
This is why we do these things remotely, so you can't throw stuff at us. So, Tor, what kind of specs for your computer do you have?
It's the new fastest Skylake processor and just a GTX 970.
Okay, so he's using one of the newer Skylake processors, an i7?
Yeah.
Okay.
The fastest i7 and then 16 gigs of RAM.
Fastest i7, 16 gigabytes of RAM, and a GTX 970.
Yeah, I was going to have more RAM, but they lost it.
They lost it?
Yeah, it sucks.
That's completely unacceptable.
Chikama says so. It's not so it's a desktop, not a laptop. That is correct.
Yeah.
For the presentations on Thursday, today I'm at home on my desktop, my gaming desktop, very similar to Tor's. But we'll be demoing pretty much entirely on laptops because it's being done from the live PDX event. Definitely sign up for that one. I love those events. Like seeing Gideon and Javis, great guys. They put on excellent events. Let's see. Does Tor use a script for creating pipes from selected edges, or is it built-in functionality?
I'm using a script.
Tor is using a script for that.
So Seneca's quick pipe script.
Seneca's quick pipe script. Basically,
lots of Seneca scripts still work, grab Seneca's scripts. They are beautiful. Some of the stuff we've added, like our mesh cleanup, I believe that was a Seneca script to start off with, and that's an essential tool in MODO, absolutely essential. And even like rounded edge and stuff like that, which is one that I used to use all the time. Now we actually have alignment tools and stuff like that. And James Morgan says inspiring stuff. You are inspiring people right now, Tor.
Okay, well, thanks so much for watching, everybody. As you can tell, my voice has changed considerably, and that's because I kind of mixed together the recording audio from the webinar and a pre-recorded video from Tor. Wanted to be able to show this to you in the highest quality possible. So there is another video that's longer. It's very poor quality because it's WebEx. And if you guys want that, shout out, and we'll at least provide that to you in at least a crude manner. But man, it does awful things to like the screen ratio and all sorts of other stuff. So I at least wanted to provide you with this screen record, and it's higher quality, so at least we give you more or less what you need. So from this point forward, we will be streaming on Twitch. Yeah, it's going to be much higher quality. It'll end up on the web way faster. So good stuff, at least, coming. Thanks for bearing with us, and yeah, we got a bright future ahead of us. Thank you so much, Tor, for doing this for us. You blew people's minds and showed them exactly why MODO is an amazing application. Have a great time, everybody. Thanks for watching.